And welcoming Coach Dean Lockwood.
Can everybody hear me okay? How about back there? Can you guys hear me now? You guys can hear okay? Okay, I may do this because I move around a little bit and I talk with my hands a lot. So if you can hear me, you all can hear me all right? Yeah. Okay, good. I may do it that way. First of all, let me just say something. You guys must have done that Earth, Wind, and Fire for me. That's real music right there, y'all. That's back in the day. That's sure. Philip Bailey, Maurice White, you know what I mean? Hey, you guys asked Coach Izzo before he met Loopy. I'll bet you he had a few dances with Earth, Wind, and Fire when he had his hair parted down the middle. I'll bet he happened. I bet that happened. I will tell you something else about me real quick. Let's get started. I got a confession to make. You guys have probably known some people who gotten kicked out of bars, gotten kicked out of restaurants, gotten kicked out of stores. You're looking at a guy who just yesterday got kicked out of the country, got kicked out of a country. Okay? So I'm making a recruiting trip to Canada. Any Canadian student athletes here? Any Canadians here right now? Okay, that's all right. Nothing against Canada. But two coaches had told me that all you need is passport and a vaccination card. Well, great, okay, got those two things. Well, I get to the border, and the border guy looks at me and he says, did you also know you needed a negative COVID PCR test within the last 72 hours? I said, sir, no, I didn't. So he whisked me off to immigration. I get escorted to immigration. I got to go through a whole series of questions. They looked at my car, did all the things in my car, looked at me, it's like something, I'm smuggling something, so I don't know. I would spend time in immigration. They were real nice, so they gave me paperwork, and then they literally gave me a police escort out of the country. So let me tell you something, y'all. When I do something, it's go big or go home, all right? I went big yesterday. All right, I'm going to talk to you a little bit, and I'm going to make sure that I monitor myself a little bit, because I'm very, very passionate about a lot of things, but I'm certainly most passionate about my faith. And so again, I'm going to share from you from the heart, but I also want to be respectful and cognizant of your time. That like they say, sometimes when they say a speaker, when they put a watch out, you know what it means? For some, absolutely nothing. But I'm gonna not do that. Okay. So I'm gonna be respectful of that. What I want to talk to, I know last week you all talked about anchors, right? Anchoring to a rock, to the rock especially. And I kind of want to follow that up a little bit. I have some notes here, so again, I'm going to move around. Pardon me, indulge me a little bit when I go back and forth. Okay. I think this goes without saying, and we've experienced this in the last year and a half. We live in a changing world. We live in a changing world. I can't tell you in my life how it changes. I was talking with some coaches the other day when I went recruiting them. Somebody who's close to my age, and we were laughing because of all the changes. I mean, when we were sitting where you're sitting, who'd have ever thought we would have had cell phones, and not only did phone stuff, but we could look stuff up and do things on it. The technology is just amazing. And I think of you all, whenever I speak to a group of this demographic and where you are in your life right now, I think of, wait 20 years. What's 20, 30 years going to bring about for all of you? We live in a changing world. And my question to you on the heels of that is simply this. What do you have in your life that doesn't change? What do you have in your life right now that you can rest assured say, this is unchanging. This is the same yesterday, today, and forever for me. What doesn't change? You guys would be kind of maybe a little incredulous to believe this, but there was a time when I too had a full head of hair, right? And it was dark and it was full, and I could run at one point. I could break a 5-minute mile and all this stuff. Those days are gone. It's changed. It's changed. Those things will change for all of you. Eventually, your athletic ability won't be quite what it is today. Enjoy this time. Anybody ever going to pause for a minute? Our players, Lauren may not know this yet, but our players, I love movies. Anybody ever see the movie Dead Poets Society? Did you ever see that movie? Great, right? You guys know who Robin Williams was? A genius comic. Died much too soon. He played, and it's based on a true story. If you ever want to just watch a good movie, a good, clean movie, or Dead Society. Great message in it. Well, at one of the scenes, he's a teacher at a prep school, English teacher. He takes the class out of the classroom and he walks them by all the photos on the walls. Just like you can see here, we got them at Breslin, you got them, all the photos of the old teams and the old players. And he says, at first he says, look at them. And then he says, boys, get closer. Put your ears. Listen to them. Listen to them. They're talking, listen. You gotta listen, get closer. Make your lives extraordinary. Your time is short. Your time is short. Make your lives extraordinary. Because your window and your time is short, y'all. What an incredible thing for y'all to be here and to wear a jersey that says Michigan State, to pursue a sport that you love. What an incredible blessing that is. And I'm going to tell you something from experience. The years pass fast. It goes fast. It flies by. And the further you go down the line to the end, it starts to go by at an alarmingly fast rate. So once again, my question to you, I ask you, what do you have that's unchanging? Because someday, the number that you have, somebody else is going to wear it. The spot on the team you have, somebody else is going to have it. The chair I'm in, I'm sitting in a chair in the office right now. I know someday somebody else is going to sit there. What in your life do you have that's unchanging, that's unshakable, that's immovable? I think I'm going to tell you, it's not too early to think about it. In fact, it's very, very important that you do. See, one of the things, there's myths about the Christian life. And one of the things I'll tell you, I've been a believer for as long as I can remember. I'm very, very fortunate to have a mom who was my strong spiritual force in my life. She introduced me, and she never forced it. That was a beautiful thing. It was a natural thing. She never forced it. You know, if I wanted to go to church, she early on, she took me to church, but then there came a point of decision where it was up to me. But one of the things that I think is a myth sometimes about the Christian life is that you think that, I hear people say this all the time. Well, if your God's such a loving God, how come this happens? Or, if you believe in God and God is real and you're one of his people, then how come this happened to you? Let's just get something straight right now. Being a Christian does not insulate us, any of you, who's a believer. It doesn't insulate us from problems. Nowhere does it say that. In fact, one of the last things that Jesus told his disciples before he left the earth, in this world you will have trouble. He told them flat out. He told them the truth, like any good coach, right? A good coach is going to tell you the truth. Sometimes it's not always what you want to hear. My college coach, my freshman year, first week, he said, let me tell you, you may not always like it here, but I'm going to tell you the truth as I believe it to be. Jesus was the epitome of that. He told people the truth, even when it was hard to hear. And he told his disciples, in this world you will have trouble. Anybody remember what he said next? Take heart. I have overcome the world. So you're looking for an anchor? You're looking for a rock? Exhibit A right there. Let's keep moving. Here's the thing about that promise too. Jesus essentially was telling them, take heart, I've overcome the world. Any promise, any promise, is only as good as the person making it. Am I right? There are people in your lives right now that you wouldn't believe them, or people that you know of, let's say, hopefully they're not in your lives heavy and strong, if they're like this. If they told you the sky was blue and the grass was green, you'd have to go out to check it, right? And then there are people in your life that if they told you something, it just seemed no way. You believe them because you've established a trust and a credibility. See, a promise is only as good as the person making it. And here's a decision that every person, every Christ follower, every person that is maybe deciding whether or not they want to be a Christ follower, and maybe you're just unsure and you want to check this out a little bit more. The question you have to answer is, can I believe the promise maker? Can I believe the promise maker? And that is a pivotal question, because the answer to that will determine the direction that you take. So trusting promises is number one, and that leads me to one of my verses that has just been a rock for my life. Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. You can read it for yourself right there. I'll give you a second. That, and I can recite it chapter and verse, because I will tell you something, folks. I'm one person. Coach Harlan next week is going to give you his life experience. Touch on that. I can only give you mine, and again, I'll speak from the heart. I can't tell you. This is my 40th year of college coaching. I'm starting my 40th year. I started when I was 12, by the way, but that's all right. God has taken unbelievable care of me. Unbelievable. That has been my rock. That is the anchor. That's been my rock. Because I'm going to tell you, I've been fired. I've had adversity. We've had tough seasons. We've lost players. Had players go through adversity. One of the hardest things I ever had to do as a head coach, I was a 32-year-old head coach, and I had to go to a player's apartment and tell him that his mom and dad had been killed instantly in a car accident. Still to this day, a very, very emotional, hard thing to do. Been a lot of ups, been a lot of downs, but I will tell you this, through it all, that has held. That has been what has been immovable, unshakable, and the same for me. No matter what the circumstances, no matter whether things are good, or whether things are bad, or anywhere in the middle, that has been my anchor. That has been my rock. So I can tell you, number one, for me, there are 3 quick points that I'll make with you tonight. Number one is trust the promises. Can you trust promises? And I will tell you from my experience, the answer to that is yes. You can trust that promise. Second thing I want to talk to you about is identity. And I think this is important for all people, but I think where you are in your lives right now is so important. Let me ask you a question. As an athlete, your sport, and I know everybody here, I would hope and I would want this for you, that you have a burning fire in your gut to be good at your sport. I hope that you're driven by passion and love to compete and to test yourself and to challenge yourself, and you're willing to get out of your comfort zones to do that and to be good and to excel. I hope that for all of you. But I want to ask you this question. For you and your sport, is it who you are, or is it what you do? And I think that's a very important distinction to make. Is it who you are and what you do? And I think there's a fine line that can separate that. And I think you have to put some thought into that. Because going back to my point of a moment ago, at some point this will end. At some point this will end, folks. I'm looking each of you in your eyes, and I'm going to tell you, at some point this will end. Coach Thompson at Georgetown used to keep a deflated ball in his office, and he'd tell guys, he'd throw it to guys, he'd have them come in for visits, he'd throw it to them. What are you going to do when your ball deflates? Because at some point your ball will deflate. So what is your identity? Is your identity solely wrapped up into you as an athlete and into your sport? And I'm going to tell you, I'm sitting up here as an Exhibit A, and even to this day, and let me just pause for a second too. If you think problems don't exist as you get older and life gets simpler and easier, well, let me just tell you something. You fight battles all your life. Mentally, spiritually, the whole bit. They're just different. My battles are different than what your battles may be, but I'm fighting them all the time. I'm fighting them all the time. So again, going back to your identity, is it who you are, or is it what you do? See, I was fortunate. I got a head coaching job when I was relatively young. As I told you, I was actually 31 when I first got the job. And as we were building the program, we eventually got really good teams and competed at a higher level and all that. But the early years were tough. We went through a lot of things. My identity was wrapped up into our won and loss record. I'm not ashamed to, but I will.
Bluetooth disconnected. Bluetooth and Bluetooth connected.
I guess I'm done. No, I will tell you this. I was a head coach at Lockwood University in Midland, Michigan, right down the road here, not far. At the time, I don't know if they still have it, Midland had a 24-hour Kroger's. So when we were struggling, one year, my first year, we won single-digit games. I used to shop at just before, like 11:45. I'd go in there when I'd think, okay, when are the least amount of people? Sometimes some really weird people would come in like at 1 o'clock. So I try to find a window between like 11:30 and 1 o'clock where I can get in, get out, not encounter too many weirdos, but not encounter too many people that I didn't have to talk to them, because my whole identity was wrapped up into the win and loss thing. And it can get you, y'all. It can get you when you're aware of it, but it can also get you when you're not aware of it. And you have to be careful. And I think you have to really spend time and thought. Is your identity, is your sport, your identity as an athlete, is it what you do? Is it what you do? Or is it who you are? And here's the thing. If it's entirely who you are, then I'm going to tell you what I've experienced, and I think you will too. Winning, there'll never be enough. There'll never be enough. If winning is your sole goal, it's wonderful. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm as competitive as anybody in this room. We don't win every game. But if that's the sole thing, there'll never be enough wins to satisfy me. If your goal someday is to go out and make money, there's not enough money in the world that will satisfy you. But here's the joy of what you do right now, what I do, what we get to do. It's who we become in the process. It's who we become with the process of this pursuit and this chase and this drive to be excellent. It's who we become, who we're making ourselves. Now, in the process of that, and again, here's another myth about Christianity. Sometimes when you have these gatherings, FCA, AIA, and there's this kind of soft mushiness that can come across. Let me tell you something. As Christian athletes and coaches, we should compete at the highest level of which we're capable. We should burn to drive with excellence, to pursue excellence, and be as good as we can be. To think that you can't have faith and be competitive is as big a myth as there is out there. Don't buy into that for 1 second. Part of our job, Lord tells us to bloom where we're planted. And bloom to me means the very best you can be. If you believe that God has given you these gifts to put you here right now, then you're not going to settle for average. That's the worst thing somebody could call you is average. Don't settle for average. Don't settle for mediocre. Be the best that you can be, and be that every single day. And that's important because that is wrapped up in your identity. So it's important to define that. I think we have to know what's important to God. There's a great verse in the Bible, Old Testament. Israel wanted a king. And first they got this Saul guy, and he was big and tough, but he had a lot of issues, character flaws. So now they're looking for a new king. They're looking to anoint a new king, the prophet Samuel. God tells him, go to the house of Jesse and have him show you his sons. And I picked one of them. So Samuel goes to Jesse, and one by one he parades his sons out. And the Bible doesn't get real specific, but you get the impression in that story. It's in Samuel 6, 1 Samuel 16:7. I think it is Phil. I think Phil will definitely correct me if I'm wrong on that. They're basically, it's almost like, you see it like these mini camps are one by one, they're looking them out, they're checking guys out, and these guys are big, strong guys. And Samuel thinks, surely, Lord, this one. No, that's not the one I picked. No, that's not the one I picked. And Jesse finally says, none of these guys? And Samuel says, that's the only son that you've got? Are these all the sons you've got? He said, there's one more. He's out in the field tending flocks. And the Lord reminded Samuel in that moment, he said, remember, man looks at the outward appearance. God looks at the heart. So how does that apply to you? Know what's important to God. Know what's important to God. God looks at your heart. How tall you are, how much you play, He's not looking at that. He's looking at, are you giving the best that you have to give? Are you getting the most of what I've given you? He looks at your heart. Is your heart pure? And by pure, I don't mean without fault or without bad thoughts and bad words. Those things happen. I'm gonna tell you, I work on stuff all the time. Sometimes in my passion, stuff comes out of my, I gotta check myself. But what he means is, are you giving the best that you have to give? Every single day. See, man looks at the outward. How tall are you? How fast are you? What can you do? The intangibles, don't ever undervalue or underestimate the power of the intangibles, about what ticks in here. That's, you know what, no one's ever been able to measure that for us. We can measure height. We can measure how fast you run a 40. We can measure vertical. We can't measure what beats inside your chest and what pumps in your head. This great computer that has given you. So that's an important piece of identity. Very, very important. Another thing that I love that God said, Jesus was taught, Jesus was so wise, so wise. And one of the things he said at one point, he was actually warning about false prophets that were coming in and they were trying to kind of mess with people's minds and distort God's word. And he said, don't buy into that. And what he said next is very profound. It applies to you as athletes. They'll know you by your fruit. You will be able to recognize them by their fruit. I'm going to be real blunt with y'all. Coaches do that all. You know how we recognize and get to know you all? By your fruit. What's your work ethic like? What's your energy like every single day? What's your passion like? How much extra time are you willing to invest and put in? How much are you giving to your teammates? We know you by your fruit. And your faith is the very same thing. Know what's important to God and they'll know you by your fruit. And along those lines, very important point, do your actions match your words? That's part of what fruit is all about. Do your actions match your words? Last thing I'm going to tell you. So we've talked about trusting promises. We've talked about identity. Now, last thing I want to share with you, and this is going to be real short, is your power source. Your power source. Where does it come from? And I want to bring that back to what you all talked about last week as your anchor, your rock. Your power source. Have you ever wondered when you talk with other Christians and you gather, maybe some of you are young Christians, maybe you haven't decided yet. It doesn't matter where you're. It's wonderful that you're here. But when you talk to somebody that's been a Christian for, do you ever wonder, somebody ever thinks, gosh, they're unusually happy? You know, man, they're always upbeat and happy and joyful. Do they ever have a bad day? Do they ever kick their dog or do something, you know? Do you ever wonder about that? You ever think about that? Seriously. I do. I think about that. But I have an answer for you. 1 Peter. This verse right here, I have to tell you, will give you a very large part of that answer. See, I haven't seen Jesus. I've seen Jesus in action. I've seen Jesus through other people, but I haven't actually seen Jesus. I haven't seen God. But you know what? I love him. I love him. Absolutely. I don't love anything more in my life. I love him above all. And even though I haven't seen him, I believe in him. And boom, right there, line 4. I'm filled with an inexpressible and glorious joy. I can't explain it entirely, but it's there. You know why? I believe the promise maker. I believe the promise maker. I've lived 40 plus years, 50 plus years of trusting the Lord with all your heart and lean not unto your own understanding, in all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make your path straight. I've lived that. I believe it. And because of that, I am filled with an inexpressible and glorious joy. And why?